came over from Sydney.
Well, firstly, I should explain I'm not Australian. I'm actually English, but I migrated there 10 years ago, so you're not going to get any of the Australianisms from me, no good days and all that sort of thing.
And also, Ben, you're not on the grass.
Oh, I'm not. We never stand on the grass. So, when I spoke to Margherita back in January, I think it was, and she asked for a title, I gave the title, and I had no idea what I was going to be talking about at that point. But at the Gardens, my job was to go from an existing, very old database that was designed for museums and move on to one that was much more adaptable to plant collections. And when we started talking about it with the various teams, this was the phrase I heard the whole time. Well, we've always done it this way. Why would we want to change? But
no. Is it still turned off? Yeah.
Yeah. So I thought I'd just give a bit of background about the setup. So the gardens are, we've got four collections. So one in Sydney, the one in the southwest is our Australian Botanic Garden, and then we have one up in our Blue Mountains, about a couple of hours from Sydney itself. And we've also recently merged with a parkland in the centre of the city called Centennial Park. And in addition, we have a plant bank, seed bank, which is based at the Australian Botanic Garden, which is also managed on the database. So Sydney Gardens, we are basically we're the site of the first landing. So it was the first points of contact that when Captain Cook and Joseph Banks got to Australia, and that's basically the reason why the garden exists, is that it was the site of the first farm and so on. So it wasn't actually a botanic garden at the beginning, it was just a means of survival. But now we've been there 200 years, it's 30 hectares and various amounts of taxa. We get a huge number of visitors, but there's no access fee, so it's a cut through for a lot of people. It's a nice walk around the edge of the harbour, and for a lot of people it's to come and take the iconic photo of the harbour bridge and the Opera House. So a lot of time you'll be in the gardens doing some plant recording, and people will come and say, can you tell me where the Botanic Gardens is? I say, well, you're here. Which is always a little disappointing. So we're moving more recently into a lot more of display horticulture. We recently opened or redeveloped our existing glass houses, and my boss, the director, is originally from Texas, and he loves big, blousy displays, which they may not be particularly botanical, but they get people in, and they love it. And it's for marketing, people love this. It's known as it's the Calix Wedding Centre now, pretty much. So we've got a display in there at the moment of carnivorous plants, which marketing hate because brides don't want to have photographs with Venus flytraps and what have you in the background. And we're also very much about events. So we get very good promotion from New Year's Eve is a very big event for us, and then we have things like the Vivid Festival, which is a lights display thing, which gets a huge number of people through the gardens. Our second garden is the Australian Botanic Garden, which, as it says, is purely for the display of Australian species, and they're all collected primarily from New South Wales, but further afield as well. And this is probably our purest botanic garden, in as much as we've got a lot of known origin material. It's mainly species. There's a little bit of cultivars and so forth, but it's still quite young. It's extremely hot. It goes from today, what's the temperature here? So about 8 or 9 degrees. That would be about our coldest, and it goes to 45 or so in the summer, and we probably get 750 mil of rain per year, and I think we're about to go into water restrictions. There's also the home of research into the Wallamai pine, which I guess most people know, and that was it's a big draw card. It's a terrible garden to grow Wallamai in. It hates it. It's too hot and too dry. They do really well over here, I was in Scotland. They're brilliant. They love it in Scotland. They hate it in Sydney. They're not particularly doing particularly well even in the mountains. I think that Phytophthora has got into the collection, so they're undertaking translocations to other sites in the Blue Mountains. But it's one of these places that no one knows. There's only a few people that actually know the real location. So particularly if it's publishing your data, there's no one. I know 3 people who've been to the site in the wild, but they keep it very, very strict. And then finally we have our gardens up in the Blue Mountains, which is our cool climate garden, primarily for Southern Hemisphere collections, and lower vista numbers, but it's set in the middle of a World Heritage Site. I don't think you'd be allowed to put a botanic garden with all these exotic plants into a World Heritage Site now, so we have to be fairly careful about making sure that we don't have plants that are going to suddenly run riot throughout the Blue Mountains. But that's a garden that I always feel most familiar and comfortable with, because there's a lot of cool temperate stuff, which Sydney grows much more of the tropical. So on to how we used to do our recording. So we were very paper bound, and it was very much, so this sheet here, this is a nice clean example. Mostly by the time this had been to and from the gardens to the nursery to the plant records, it would just be black. And but people thought this was perfectly acceptable, and there'd be a lot of guesswork as to the numbers that were going out and so forth. So basically, they would request that a plant was added to the system. It was added to the system. It would go out in the garden, and we would rinse and repeat. And that was about it. And we used a system called EMU, which was principally designed for museums and management of static collections. So they loved it. I hated it. So when I was brought in, that's not quite the right place. When I applied for the job and got the job, I was tasked with, we had to bring our records management into a modern digital age and make it accessible to our visitors. So I guess I said at the beginning, kept on hearing, but we've always done it this way. This is, why do we need to change? It works perfectly well. So the process that we went through, and it's myself and 2 colleagues who work in the plant records team, we needed to identify our primary users, and basically the engine rooms for each of the 3 gardens are the nurseries. Everything comes in through there and everything goes out through there. So we thought if we get the nursery on side and we get them working, we find out how they do things, then that will be the first step. And then I thought it would be the horticulturalists would be our next people that we needed to get on. But we quickly discovered that our arboricultural teams were the most pedantic. They were very difficult, very demanding, and also actually probably the most knowledgeable, interestingly enough, about both their trees and about the records. Then we had the horticulturalists with a certain level of disinterest, and then the herbarium just use it very occasionally. And then we also have a big volunteer group who are much keen on using it, and then certainly they've been our biggest takers of Garden Explorer. They absolutely love it. We've also found the downside from Garden Explorer is people have used it as an excellent way to identify plants that they want to steal. So if you're thinking about putting out anything rare, cycads we put out very rare cycads, and it took 2 weeks to realise that whoever had come in had cut off the fronds, put the fronds back in the ground, but dug up the whole plant. So and that's because they were given pinpoint accuracy as to exactly where it was. So it's a bit of a learning zone. So we engaged with these groups and found out how they did things, what their processes. We listened to them, and then our biggest tool was doing updates, was communicating, so saying how things were. So when we switched off our existing records, and we said to them, it'll be 2 weeks, and I'm looking at Havard here, and we managed, I think we got it all done in 3 weeks, and we were back up and running in 4. So they had done nothing for 4 weeks, and we then had to teach them new ways of doing things. So basically the same process applied in terms of the accessioning, but we were trying to bring more rigour to the process. So some gardens use propagation as a plant acquisition process, or as a plant out process, or any other thing that they care to do. So we started to make them complete the accession forms properly. Then we would check the names and put them on and so forth. And then on plant outs, it used to be a bit of a free-for-all. They would just wander into the nursery, they go to their bench, they'd see their plants, help themselves, put them out in the garden, and then they'd think about perhaps updating. Or they'd just change the numbers by hand on that sheet that you saw earlier. And so we brought in the system where you need to get an approval. So when you're putting a plant out in the garden, it's going to the right place, it fits that area of the garden, and so on. And then we've tried to take them to the fact that they should be updating the record. So it's interesting, the question, how many of us think that Hortus should update their records, and everyone said yes. And then how many people think it's a good idea. I still think it's a good idea. I just wish that Hortus thought it was a good idea as well. So we ran with the system for a while, and what we found was actually once people started using it, they wanted more. But we also had an assumption of how they went about various tasks. So it was clear that we didn't really understand fully the kind of nuances of the system. So we had to go back and refine and refresh. But then people, once they start using things, they wanted to have additions. And the most challenging group, once again, were the arboriculturists, who kept on saying this isn't a tree management system. You go, well, no, it's a collections management system and so on. But I don't know how many of you have arboricultural teams, but they want to know every single count and number of leaves on the tree, and it's just you couldn't give them enough information to put in. And then you get all the various things, and people saying, well, it's not the system that we used to use, or it's not this, it's not that, and so on. And you just sort of have to go, yeah, well, we know. And we adopted. This isn't a racist thing. This is. I used to work for a local council in Sydney, and we would get letters from residents asking for various bits. And generally, we always said no, but you can't just say no. So I was told to do the kiss, kick, kiss, and you go kiss, where you say. So in this case, you say, "Oh, thanks very much for giving us the feedback. That's great to hear." And then kick. I don't think we're going to be able to help at this point in time. And then kiss, keep up to date, and we'll let you know what the changes are made. And normally that works quite well. But there are only so many times that you can kiss people before they start to want a bit more. So the other thing that we have is that we've actually asked people to take ownership of their records, to manage their areas that they look after. And this is the latest thing that we have. It's been officially recorded that they're now doing things that aren't part of their job. And so, well, it's always been part of your job. You just haven't done it. And we just, and you say, well, how long does it take? And they say, oh, we're doing 4 hours. And you think, no, it's 15 minutes. It's about 15 minutes a week of updating. It's about 2 hours of chat. And then, actually, one of the big issues we have is access to computers, so it is a bit difficult for people to get on. We haven't found necessarily that shiny toys have worked well, so the apps and we've given them devices to record on and so on. So we're still working on getting people used to using those and adapting. And they don't want to use their own phones because of data and all this sort of thing. And we're just also going through a system now of what not to record, because we were recording every single thing, so we no longer record annuals or any of those sorts of things. So we're refining just how much we do record, or record and make available to the public. And we're trying to bring some rigour to it. So we want to get a proper collections policy. We had a one-sided piece of paper which sort of indicated what people are meant to do, what the gardens and the collections were about. And we're obsessed with thematics in Australia. I'd never come across thematics before I went. I don't know if other people use it. but you know, we have to be able to map the garden according to a theme and so on. So we're trying to adapt to that system, and we're trying to get our heads around, you know, more of the collection management issues. Again, just bringing rigour instead of just seeing it as a garden, but a more, you know, a documented, well-researched garden. So our next steps are to push forward with the Garden Explorer, try and get more users onto that. We're really wanting to get more into the mobile recording. We want to do much more labelling. I'm incredibly impressed at the amount of labelling at these gardens. It's phenomenal. We're trying to introduce KPIs into Hortus, to bring record keeping as an actual KPI, and then we're just learning from the last 2 years about how we can improve and how we can help the staff. So just thought I'd finish off with a few pretty pictures of the places that are working, and thank you very much for your attention. No question?
Are you planning on hiding any of your plants? If you say you've lost a side pad, are you there any that you're hiding?
We do and we don't, because we have big users of Twitter, so who are big followers. We get huge followers. So the former curator put up a picture of a water lily, and that was gone the following morning. So, but we are being a bit more careful on things. So, but it's a difficult one because we want people to be able to go and find these. And anyway, we have a begonia collection that's managed by a begonia society, quite badly, but it's managed. And you can see people on a Monday who go around circle to see what's new that's gone in, and they can guarantee if they put in a new cultivar or a new variety, that will be gone by the Friday afternoon. So it's very difficult to police. We don't have like the queue gardens for the police going around, but we do get the rangers that stop some Chinese visitors who are harvesting irises for well, I don't know what the hell they do, but getting the to be honest. And we had a thing called a cat plants from Madagascar, which people find these things very quickly, don't they? So we've had to actually just dig them out and lose them because it's too hard. So things like that we just keep in the nursery, unfortunately.
There were a few more hands, right?
What's a KPI?
Oh, key performance indicator.
So interjection there. Mats had a talk about KPIs at the conference in Amsterdam, or at one of these conferences.
Lyte.
Yeah. Yeah.
More.
Great.
I thought I saw more hands over here. Yep.
Okay. Shops and signs. Thank you very much.